Good evening and welcome to the Glendale Sustainability Commission meeting for September 7th, 2023. Meetings are broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 6, and AT&T UVerse, Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, iOS, and Android devices using a free app called Cablecast and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendale.gov/agendas. Call 818-548-4013 for program schedules. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be taken when that agenda item is discussed. If you have any question about matters on the agenda or requests for assistance, please contact the city clerk at 818-548-2090 during regular business hours. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bartrusov, Commissioner Khartounian.
Here.
Commissioner Werner. Here. Vice Chair Bazemore.
Here.
Chairperson Pinkerton. Ex officio Ispangion.
Here.
Ex officio Welch.
Here.
Next item, 1A, Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. 3, 2, 1. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1B, Land Acknowledgement.
We would like to acknowledge that we are holding this meeting in the city of Glendale on traditional lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people. We would like to pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and the Tongva communities who continue to be stewards of this land. We encourage our audience to learn more about the Tongva tribe and any indigenous communities in California and beyond. You can find a list of books and resources at eglendalelac.org/Native American 2022.
The agenda for the September 7, 2023 meeting of the Sustainability Commission was posted on August 31st, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Item 2, approval of minutes. 2A, approval of the minutes of the Commission regular meeting held August 3rd, 2023. Do we have a first?
Are there any modifications or corrections?
No, I'd like to move we accept the minutes as submitted.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Commissioner Bartrusov, Commissioner Khartounian,
Yes.
Commissioner Werner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bazemore,
Yes.
and Chairperson Pinkerton. Item 3, board member staff comments.
Do any of my fellow commissioners or ex officio commissioners have comments?
Yes, I have a comment. There's a organization I was recently made aware of called Anew, and their mission is to help find new homes for unwanted, like surplus items or unneeded office furniture, that kind of thing, and they try to funnel that to nonprofits, so they're keeping it out of the landfill, but also helping out nonprofits that need things like that. So I was wondering if we could have someone come and speak. I've spoken to them, and they seem willing to send somebody to come and speak about what it is that they do, and just wanted to see if everyone would be amenable to having someone do that. Like, I think it would require a second to put it on the agenda, so.
I can second it.
So, okay. So yeah, the motion is to have someone from the organization, Anew, ANEW, come and speak about their sustainable mission.
Roll call, Commissioner Bartrusov, Commissioner Khartounian,
Yes.
Commissioner Werner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bazemore,
Yes.
and Chairperson Pinkerton.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? I have one. I was just thinking over just today, actually, and wanted to see if the idea is actually to see if we could get any kind of legislative update to the commission. So this is pertaining to, the California legislative period is ending in September, is my understanding, and I just was wondering if we could possibly get an update on, what's happened this session, what it is that's been passed, and then how that might pertain to this commission, to the city going forward. Would be interested to know kind of what some of the big bills are and how what it looks like, as well as potentially some things coming up down the pike for next session. So if anyone would be interested in that.
Oh, the one suggestion I have, if we don't have somebody in-house that can do it, the League of Cities, as a member of the League of Cities, their Environmental Quality Committee is available, and that's a service that they provide to their member cities. What significant bills passed in this space, in the sustainability space, during this legislative period, and what's forthcoming. Might want to wait a few weeks or a couple of months, but dust will settle on new bills.
Yeah, and
Just a suggestion.
I like that idea. I think if this could be done possibly in November, December even, it doesn't need to be next month, but I think a kind of update from staff on that would be helpful. And then potentially, having this be kind of an annual or potentially even semi-annual item that we could have. So if there's anyone that would be willing to second that.
Second?
Roll call, Commissioner Bartusoff, Commissioner Khartounian,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bazemore,
Yes.
and Chairperson Pinkerton.
Okay. Unless there are any other commissioner comments.
Just an offer, David, if I can be of any assistance to connect with the league, the correct person staffer, and the Environmental Quality Committee, I'm available.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Khartounian, and we do have a staff member. The city does have a legislative platform, and we have a staff member who keeps abreast of that platform. We have consultants in Sacramento that will keep us abreast. So is it, just for a point of clarification, is it you just want on environmental sustainability issues, or you want a larger remit than that?
No, this would be purely within the purview of this commission.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Item
Okay.
4.
Well, staff, any comments from staff, please?
Thank you, Vice Chair Bazemore. I just want to inform the commissioners that the next City Council meeting of September 12th, I know Commissioner Bartusoff is interested in the drive-through ordinance. So the extension of the interim ordinance number 5996 prohibiting the issuance and entitlement and/or permits for new and conversion of existing drive-throughs is going to City Council to get that ban extended. So it's not going to be full debate, it's just going to be extension on that. And then on October 10th, City Council meeting, also going to City Council is the professional services agreement with 3E to assist Glendale Water and Power with the development of a plan to increase solar penetration and develop additional distributed energy resources. And that is continued from the 8/22 and 8/29 council meeting. So I know commissioners may be interested in that. And then finally, in front of the commissioners, I have placed 2 items. The first one, the smaller of the 2 items, is what's going to be upcoming at the next commission meetings. The way it's looking, and we'll talk about this a little bit further on today, the October 23rd meeting is going to be dedicated entirely to the CAP, and with the consultants coming to present to the commission. They're going to present on the tool, looking at different mitigation adaptation strategies, and how those strategies will help us set goals and targets for our greenhouse gas emissions. And it'll be a fairly interactive with the commission, looking at those different strategies, giving comment and everything. So we anticipate the whole meeting being connected to that. Urban forest updates, therefore, has been pushed to November, along with the bicycle plan, and also to bring back information for Commissioner Cartoonian and Vice Chair Person Bazemore on demand response program, which was asked for. A request was sent to GWP for that information, so that should be coming back as requested. In terms of the tracker, one of the items that we're going to talk about tonight is regarding contract purchasing. Commissioner Pinkerton asked for a report back on that. So the commission may choose to push that item until Commissioner Pinkerton is back with us in the commission, or they can choose to hear the item tonight. It's just a brief report. Another item is the tree protection that Commissioner Cartoonian asked for. That will be addressed at the November 23rd meeting when the urban forest item comes back. And drive-throughs, we were after the 9/12 City Council meeting, we'll have a better idea of when that will be coming back to the Commission for your input. And then finally, Commissioner Pinkerton has asked about market infrastructure funds. A request has been made to get that information. So when we get that, we'll be bringing that back. And that is an update on the tracker. I'm available to answer any questions on that the commissioners may have.
One question, David, for the ordinance, the drive-through ban ordinance, do you know how that's looking kind of once it passes this next year, if the council decides to extend it, at that point, do they need to decide if whether to have it be a permanent ban, or can they extend it beyond then as well? What does that look like?
So my understanding is they're going to potentially extend the ban for another year, and we have hired a consultant to help us prepare a report on that, and that report will then come back to council for them to make a full decision. But it's anticipated that that will go through this commission too, and another commission too, prior to going to council. So the commissioners will have the opportunity for input on that item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, unless there are any other comments, we can move on to the next item.
Item 4, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items within jurisdiction of the Sustainability Commission. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Sustainability Commission members may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff for investigation and report. There are currently no callers on the line.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next item.
Item 5, action items. Don't have any, and so we move on to item 6, reports and information, purchasing contracts.
Okay.
So say.
Well, I would like to propose that we push this item to what it sounds like would need to be potentially November or even December, because we have what looks like a pretty full agenda that's dedicated to the CAP in October. So if there's a second, is there a second to that idea?
Only suggestion I have is possible. Let's try to squeeze it in the November, even if it is a longer meeting. The more we push it, the more things get piled on. But I would second it, pushing it to a future date.
Okay. Great. Do we need roll call for that? Yeah.
No, we'll just
Okay.
move that to the...
Thank you. All right. Next item, please.
6B, 2021 greenhouse gas emissions inventory results.
So I'm pleased to bring this presentation to the Commission. As you know, at the beginning of this year, we hired Rincon Consultants to help the city develop and prepare a climate action and adaptation plan. This is an 18-month-long project that the consultants are working on with us. They had a key initial task that they needed to complete before moving forward to develop potentially adaptation mitigation strategies. And that one was to complete a greenhouse gas inventory of the city and also to complete a climate vulnerability assessment, identifying those climate hazards that will potentially most affect the city going forward, and also what impact that will have on our populations and our infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm happy to say we have on the WebEx with us today Ryan Gardner from Rincon Consultants. Ryan is our project manager on this project for Rincon, and he's been instrumental in helping develop the greenhouse gas inventory and helping us look at the adaptation, the vulnerability assessment as we get ready to work with the consultants and again with the commission and with external parties. We're doing a lot of outreach right now to the community, to internal and external stakeholders, to inform them about this project, to begin to tell them when they can give input back into this project. So we're really entering this kind of exciting phase right now where we're going to begin to get really creative and begin to look at adaptation mitigation strategies. So with that, I'll go through the presentation and then I'll stop after the vulnerability assessment, ask if there's any questions, and Ryan can help respond to those questions, and then we'll look at the greenhouse gas inventory. This is a very high-level look at this. You'll have a copy of the greenhouse gas inventory that was sent in the packet. If you have any questions regarding the details and particulars of the inventory, Ryan and I can try and answer those for you. Well, Ryan can answer those for you. So with that, we'll go ahead. Okay. So the project that we commissioned Rincon to do was to, let's say, develop a climate action adaptation plan. And today we're going to look about the climate change and vulnerability assessment. We're going to look at the greenhouse gas inventory. We're also going to briefly discuss the California climate goals, and then briefly talk about the October meeting. So what is the goal of this project? Is to identify and assess the potential impacts of climate change, is to set in place future strategies to help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and to identify those communities and the infrastructure where we can begin to build resilience and adapt to the inevitable impacts of climate change. And as I said very much earlier on, is to really integrate the diverse voices of the community of Glendale and making sure all these people have input into this process. So why did we ask Rincon to help us with the climate vulnerability assessment? The vulnerability assessment evaluates how climate change will continue to impact vulnerability community members, natural resources, parks and buildings, community facilities, and the infrastructure within Glendale. The climate vulnerability assessment provides a foundation from which we'll develop the adaptation measures and actions in the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And it assists in identifying those communities and infrastructure assets most affected by the climate hazard. This exercise will guide us in prioritizing climate adaptation measures and actions in the CAP. Climate hazards of concern in Glendale, we all know well, are extreme heat and warm nights, drought, stormwater flooding and extreme precipitation, wildlife, landslides and air quality. Extreme heat days are defined of those days above 97.6 degrees Fahrenheit in Glendale, and these are expected to increase from 3 to 35 days per year by the end of the century. The lengths of droughts are expected to increase. Wildfire and extreme participation in Glendale and the region are expected to increase in frequency and severity. Landslide susceptibility is expected to increase as participation variability and wildfires increase. Lastly, air quality is projected to worsen as a result of wildfires, increasing temperatures, and droughts. So it's quite a prognosis that is facing us of these potential climate hazards that we're going to have to prepare for and adapt as we go forward. There are various potential impacts from each hazard to people, critical services, buildings, and infrastructure in Glendale. I won't go through this entire list, but respiratory illnesses can be triggered by extreme heat, drought, wildlife, and poor air quality. Public health and safety risks can be caused by extreme heat, drought, wildfire, landslides, flooding, and poor quality. I don't know whether anybody saw it, but there's a recent article in the LA Times about those patients with schizophrenia and how the extreme heat really impacts them and their behavior, and it's just something that they have to adapt to and overcome. Again, extreme heat on our power infrastructure, and it could potentially impact that. The heat and power delivery can be disrupted by extreme heat and wildfire events, and emergency services may be strained during extreme heat events. So those parts of our population that need those emergency services the most may not be able to have access to them, or the emergency services may not be able to get to them due to the strain that they're under. So we have to somehow prepare and adapt our city for these events, and the climate vulnerability assessment will help us do that. Climate hazards can impact anyone in our community. However, some populations will experience the harmful impacts of climate hazards first, worse, and for longer than others. The climate vulnerability assessment includes a social sensitivity analysis that determines area where sensitive populations are concentrated. The analysis is conducted at a census tract level using demographic data. More than 25 population data indicators were used in the social sensitivity analysis. Each indicator represents a characteristic that increases a person's physiological sensitivity to climate hazards and the ability of an individual to prepare for, cope with, or recover from climate hazards. The population indicators are grouped as indicated on the slide, and these are individuals facing high outdoor exposure, individuals, under-resourced individuals, individuals facing societal barriers, and also individuals with chronic health conditions or health-related sensitivities. Grouping these populations allows the city to understand what systems and structures contribute to increased sensitivity to these climate hazards. The map shown here was based on the social sensitivity analysis, but also feedback from our initial focus groups that we had in the community. The darker the area on the map, the higher the vulnerability. The map also includes additional groups that were identified as potentially sensitive based on input from these community meetings. These additional sensitive focus areas include schools, communities around the landfill, communities around the power plant, Interstate 5, and generally south and west of Glendale, shown as the dotted areas on the map. So extreme heat, wildfire, and air quality pose the greatest threats to Glendale. These hazards will directly impact our sensitive populations in Glendale, and our climate adaptation strategies will focus on increasing the resilience to these hazards, and will be developed for the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. So that's a brief overview of the Climate Vulnerability Assessment. Myself and Ryan are available to answer any specific questions you may have regarding the vulnerability assessment.
Okay, thank you, David. So we have the consultant, Ryan, on the line, is that right? Yes. Excellent. Do any of my fellow commissioners have initial questions or comments on this?
I have one, if I don't mind. David, now that we have this report, what do the departments do with it? Do they just read it and that's it, or do we do anything to prepare for the vulnerabilities and address any, in our future plans? Since, we have them ranked, and what do departments do with it?
So Commissioner Cartini, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. So this is just the initial analysis. So our next step, what we're going to do is to do the outreach. So that's not only to external stakeholders, but it's also internal stakeholders. So we have an internal working group that has representatives from each department on that group, and they're going to be socialized with this greenhouse gas inventory and this climate vulnerability analysis. Second to that, we're going to do a deep dive into each department. So we're going to have one-on-one sessions between the consultants, ourselves, and, for example, Glendale Water and Power, and, for example, Public Works, so they can begin to understand the results of this climate vulnerability assessment. And just for the point you said, it's like we need to understand what their capabilities are to help us develop these resilience strategies, these mitigation strategies going forward. So they're going to be a key part of that process as we begin to develop the strategies. This is just a baseline to say, this is the climate hazards that are facing us. This is going to be the potential severity of these climate hazards. And we're going to have to address this in our planning and programming going forward.
Does that mean eventually each department will have their own specific plan how to address to these vulnerabilities, correct?
So the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, each department will be responsible, yes, for implementing their parts of that plan.
Okay. Thanks.
As someone who lives in that South Glendale, which was identified as one of the most vulnerable area in Glendale, I hope that when they're looking at the policies for the urban forest, that's something they're thinking about too, because it's no coincidence that we're also underserved by trees, parks, that sort of thing, and that part of the city is actually warmer than North Glendale. So when we've had these heat waves and so on, every degree matters. And I actually know people personally who've died in heat waves, and so it's very serious thing. And I hope that they're looking at that in those discussions.
So, Commissioner Werner, yes, so that's going to be part of the outreach into all these different areas. We're going to have, I believe, 4 or 5 pop-up events in different areas around Glendale. We have over, I think, 12 workshops ready to go out. So we're going to make sure the community has the opportunity to hear feedback just like that as we begin to develop the mitigation and adaptation measures. So thank you for that comment.
Okay. And I'm sure the Adams Hill Neighborhood Association would be more than happy to feature speakers or to help promote an event that was going on in South Glendale. Because we are the only neighborhood association in South Glendale, so I think we could help spread the word about these things.
You're on our list to reach out to. So.
Okay, thank you.
One question for slide 7, if we can go back to that.
Oops, sorry.
There's a section or
Could you move it back?
a layer on the map here, and if you explained that already, David, forgive me. It's actually slide 7. Yep, thank you. So it says additional sensitive focus areas. Can you explain what that means? It's here on the legend, kind of the kind of gray or like speckled areas.
So those were the feedback that we got from the community of areas that weren't initially part of the vulnerability analysis, and they asked us to go look into it. So that was the schools, that was Interstate 5, that was the power plant, and that was Shoal Canyon. And that's represented by all these little dots that you can see. So those are the shaded areas, are the areas where the community gave us feedback that they wanted us to include as part of the sensitivity analysis.
Okay, so the sensitivity analysis you're saying then was not for all of Glendale, or you're saying these areas received additional analysis?
No, we received feedback from the community saying that they think that these areas should be included, are highly sensitive areas which weren't initially picked up. And so we took that information on board and we included them into this analysis.
Okay, I guess I just am, what do you mean by initially were not picked up?
So as they said, so they used the demographic data from Cal EnviroScreen and other forms to pick out which are the key areas in Glendale that would be most affected by climate change. So we had that map, and then we went out to the community and said that these are the areas that have the highest sensitivity towards climate hazards. Do you agree with this? Do you think there's anything else we should add to that map? So that's what the part of the focus group and the outreach was, is to get that input from the community.
Okay, and I just asked because the area that's shaded, certainly in South Glendale, I mean, it's the entire South Glendale. So it from what it sounds like you're saying is that area was not initially included.
No, I think all the dark areas in the map. So it's just the dotted areas which were the additional areas that the community gave us feedback on.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So it's like an overlay?
yes,
Okay.
correct.
So the colored parts are the original map, and then the community said, oh, also, when you asked for community feedback, they said, in all of these places, we feel that we have increased risk,
Correct.
and it just often it seems to overlap with basically everywhere people live, but
Right. So if you think about it, it's the main highways, it's the 210 and everything, which, follows all the pollution obviously associated with that. And then the 134, and then, again, Shell landfill, and the power plant, and the schools. So that's what creates that overlay, that dotted overlay that you see. Is there anything you want to add to that, Ryan?
No, yeah, that's in line. I think the original map, without the dots, is using data from databases at, the state level, Count VirusScreen, these kind of standard databases that look at like census data and things like that. And then the dotted layer is just feedback we got from the community that says, hey, yeah, this high level analysis is generally looking good, but we also feel that there's sensitivities in these areas because of like very Glendale specific reasons. So it just is, in some places it was very similar. Like we see the dots over like all of South Glendale. Our analysis picked that up originally. It's there because the community really did say that was a place that was under-resourced. And, we hear that tonight about the tree canopy and things like that. I think it's pretty well understood. But some of the other areas are things that, we wouldn't have necessarily got just from the baseline analysis, like around the power plants, around the freeway. So that's just kind of adding in some locations that we want to focus on moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And I guess since that is it is pretty much where most everyone lives in Glendale, I mean, it makes me think as though I'm just curious kind of what that information you'll be able to do with that information. How is that going to add to this kind of analysis that you have here? I mean, can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is like, if everywhere is a priority, then what's a priority?
Right.
I think beyond just this like spatial analysis, we also want to think about the different groups of folks who live in those areas and who may have more resources to deal with an issue, right? Like if we're talking extreme heat and you have the ability, you own your home and you have the ability to like add air conditioning if you didn't have it before, that's less, you're going to be less vulnerable than someone who's maybe renting, doesn't have that ability, is low income, can't afford those things. So I think this map gives us some idea of where we want to focus area wise, but then within that continue to drill down into like those populations who are most sensitive. So like elderly in one of these areas next to a freeway with bad air quality, with an extreme heat event, like you start to stack those things and identify maybe places where you want to focus your strategies in once we get into like the measure and action development that we're going to be talking about next month.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify that. Any other comments or questions?
I was wondering what were some of the questions that were asked, in order to collect this data?
We had general questions, and then we had, I can't remember honestly what the questions are, but I can get you that information. But we had people give us feedback. We had these questions on the board. And then we provided them dots, and they'd come along, they'll talk, and they'd put the dots onto those areas that thought were most important to them. So one of the things that did come out of this whole discussion with our stakeholders was identifying the population, especially children population, and what does that mean, and how do we categorize that? That should be children from ages 1 to 5 and everything, and that people who are initially renters wondered what the initial concerns of climate action planning was to them. So it's going through those discussions, just saying that as climate hazards increase in Glendale, potential increase in cost of living, cost of power, cost of cooling, and so that it does impact those rental populations. So we had that type of deep level discussion, but I can get you the actual questions that we asked.
Okay, thank you.
So had two, just to piggyback off of that, David, we had 2 focus group meetings with a bunch of CBOs from the community, and we put up this map originally and then asked them if there were other areas that of high priority that we were missing. And then through like a mural board process, they were able to, and discussion just with us in the room, able to talk through other areas to prioritize. And that's where a lot of this mapping came from, was kind of working with CBOs in the area who are kind of familiar with populations that might need some additional help or have some additional vulnerabilities.
Thank you. Like, for example, they were talking about older people, like what was defined, like people over 50, over 60, was there a, I was just curious about some of those kinds of things. And then students, the schools all have the dots on them because, is that because children are naturally more vulnerable to, like, airborne pollutants, or was there some other factor that was part of, more than just being school age that triggered the dots on the map?
So
I think for the, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry. Yeah, I think for the schools specifically, we tend to see in the literature that children and older folks deal less well with bad air quality, extreme heat, things like that. So that's kind of where those like sensitive receptors come up, and that's pretty well established for like all types of air pollution. And I think that's also why like areas along the 5 and near the power plant were also highlighted by the community, because they're places that likely have worse air quality already. So adding extreme heat, adding more air pollution from wildfires is going to exacerbate those conditions that they're already kind of stressed by.
All right, thank you.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, I guess, David, are we going to go through the inventory as well as a part of this item, or is it just the presentation we're getting now?
Just the presentation.
Just the presentation.
We can ask questions about the inventory.
Okay.
Sorry,
does-
just but we can ask questions about the inventory once we go through that.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about the inventory, the greenhouse gas inventory that was shared, they would like to ask?
Well, no, I'm going to talk about it a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said you are going to.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
apologies.
Yeah.
Well then, unless there are any more questions about the presentation?
I mean, just very quickly, could you repeat what the company that's doing the consultant is, the name of the company?
Rincon Consultants Limited.
Recon?
RANCON.
RINCON. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So we're now going to talk about the initial results from the greenhouse gas inventory. As you know, the city did initial inventory in 2009. There was another inventory done in 2015 by LA County. That was just aggregated data because that was county-wide. So Rincon did a specific inventory for us for the year 2021. And so we'll just talk about that briefly. And then again, if you have specific questions, regarding inventory, we can have that discussion. So we nationally did 2 inventories. The main inventory is the community inventory, so this is the whole community of Glendale. The pie chart here on the left shows the community's carbon footprint, and the majority, as one would expect, of the community's emissions, 50% come from transportation, which includes fossil fuel-powered cars, trucks, transit vehicles, and motorcycles. The second largest emission contributor is building energy. The bar chart here on the right shows more details relating to building energy emissions. You'll see that most emissions are from residential natural gas, followed by residential electricity and non-residential electricity. As you can see from the pie chart, transportation, building, and energy are the sectors we want to reduce emissions from the most, as they will have the greatest impact on the overall emissions reductions for the community. So as we begin to develop those mitigation measures, these are the 2 sectors that we're really going to delve into and look at as like how can we begin to reduce emissions, again, from transportation and from our building stock.
Could you explain for the public what T&D stands for?
Transmission and distribution.
Right, so that is the amount of electricity that's lost in the course of getting the electricity from one place to another, right? Okay, thank you.
Okay, go next slide. So we also did a municipal inventory so we could understand what our own emissions were from what we do here at Glendale, the city, as in city operations, and how we can control those. This is just a subset, obviously, of the overall community emissions. It means that they're not additive, instead provide a metric for the city to identify the greatest source of emissions that we generate, and then identify solutions how we can to reduce those emissions over time. And we want to lead by example. We want to say we are doing our best as a city. Again, the largest source of municipal emissions is solid waste, which mostly comes from the landfill methane. The next largest emissions sources include transportation and infrastructure, electricity. It's important to note that the landfill in Glendale is used by other jurisdictions, not just by us. But we have operational control over that landfill, and since we have the operational control, we are responsible for those emissions. That being said, one of the areas that we have the greatest personal decision-making power is related to transportation emissions. As shown, can you go back one slide, please? As shown on the right, emissions from employees traveling to and from work is the greatest source of municipal-related emissions, and this is followed by the vehicle fleet, which generated nearly half of municipal-related emissions in 2021. So, we're having a fleet program right now, so we're beginning to put programs in place to try and reduce these emissions. And then we already have incentives to try and get employees out of their cars and into public transport. So we are working on these, but again, it's what we're going to have to tackle going forward. How do we stop people? Well, how do we encourage people not to take their car into work and utilize other forms of transportation?
David, question. In 2021, there were a lot of us were working from home. Is this taking account people that were working at home, or is this taking account in the normal circumstance, people commuting back and forth?
So we provided the actual data that we have from that year of what people are doing to the consultants. So assuming it takes into effect that not everybody was commuting that year.
So the actual figure, employee commute, is probably higher than this, because in 2023, a lot of us are driving a lot more than we were in 2021. I know I am.
Right.
Okay, wow.
Do you want to add anything to that, Ryan?
Yeah, I was just going to add one of the kind of really exciting pieces of this inventory. Well, exciting to me because I work on inventories all the time, but we used a platform called Replica to get the VMT data for the community. This isn't for the employee commute. Like David said, it's really based, the employee commute is based off the actual data for the city. But for the community, and generally when inventories are done using the kind of legacy method, they had a really hard time picking up on the COVID changes. And we a really new program that uses really big data sets and machine learning to come up with like actual data of like where people are traveling at the time. So we have like a really accurate representation of what people were doing in that year. And we're gonna be able to use that as we move forward to see like not only like what the total amount of VMT is, but what roads people are using, why people are traveling. So we're really excited to work through that with you guys.
So Ryan, this is Commissioner Kartunian. Would you agree with my statement that the figures that were listed are probably undercount? The actual figure is probably a little bit higher than this.
Then, yeah, I think that by 2021, we were already seeing a lot of return to almost normal. It may still be a little low compared to like today, but the rebound was relatively quick, quicker than I think we expected to see, honestly.
Okay, thank you.
So as you all know, the state has a couple of major climate goals. The first is to reduce emissions by 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. And the second is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, but no later than 2045. As we develop the CAP, we'll work in line with these targets. The targets for the city have not yet been established. That is something that we want to work with the commission with at the next meeting to begin to establish those targets using this tool of like seeing these different mitigation strategies, seeing how much they impact emissions, how soon they can do that or how far out they can do that. So that's going to be part of the exercise that we're going to have at the next meeting with the commission. But as Ryan mentioned, and as we talked about, I mean, how are we going to reach our targets? I mean, these are the 5 main areas that the CAP will probably focus on in trying to develop these mitigation strategies. So 100% free carbon electricity, electrify our buildings, as Mr. Kartunian, Commissioner Kartunian was mentioning, that, you know, in order for us to do that, there's going to be huge demand on our power grids and everything. So we're going to have to understand that and how long it's going to take us to do that and what the infrastructure is going to be required in order for us to electrify our buildings and to electrify our transportation systems. We're going to have to prioritize active shared mobilities. We talked about that a little bit. How do we get people out of the car? How do we create that planning to get people out of the car? How do you develop these cities where you don't have to get into your car to do everything? That there's walkability, there's biking options, there's public transport options that allow you to go about your daily life and not necessarily use your car. And obviously, as people begin to electrify their own transportation methods, that's going to help reduce these, will help us reach our targets going forward. And then waste, water, and then sequestration. What sequestration, as Commissioner Werner said, planting trees in South Glendale and other parts of Glendale. How do we go about doing that? How do we prioritize that? And what other sequestration measures may be out there that we don't know about right now or we can use to begin to help us begin to reach our targets of reducing our emissions. So the next meeting we're going to have, it's going to be a workshop style meeting, and we're going to use this planning tool, the Spark tool, as Rincon likes to call it. And I'm not too over familiar with this tool, so I'll let Ryan talk about it and how that will work. And
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so our Spark tool is our scenario planning tool that we use. And what it will allow us to do is we break down this next step of like developing the actual things that we're going to commit to doing over the next, 7 years before 2030 to hit our target. So we'll build out the tool with at least the state targets as a starting place. And then we'll look at those sector by sector. What are the high level strategies that we can actually put in place to reduce emissions? So we can reduce, natural gas consumption. We can reduce the emissions associated with electricity. We can get people out of their cars and walking and biking, electrify the vehicles we can't. We kind of have this list of like 10 things that really will change the emissions in the city. And we'll build those out into this tool. And what we can do together is start to play around with different scenarios of, what if we electrify half of our buildings by 2030? Like, what kind of emissions reduction does that give us? And how does that compare to diverting organics or having electric vehicles? And over time, we'll kind of be able to hone in on what combinations of reductions in those different sectors will get us to our different targets. And we'll also give you a sense of, do we want to be more aggressive than the state targets, or is that aggressive enough? And I think it helps paint a really nice foundation that we can then start to, once we have those reductions, start to look at, okay, in order to get a 20 or 30 or 40% reduction in natural gas, what are the actions we're going to take? So we'll kind of go through this step by step. We'll give you the strategies and start to think about the types of measures or like the things that will actually reduce the emissions. And then from there, start to develop the actual actions that we're going to take to get to those reductions. So this will really be the first step in that process and starting to wrap our heads around what things move the needle and what the options really are for reaching these targets over time.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And then finally, just where we are in this process. So we've done the baseline analysis, which is a vulnerability assessment in the greenhouse gas inventory. We're right now heavily involved in our engagement process with both internal and external stakeholders, and for example, coming to the Commission today. We're then going to work with the Commission and also with our internal and external stakeholders in developing those preliminary measures. And then we'll refine those measures. We'll probably come back to the Commission, and then we'll go and start drafting the plan and doing the secret analysis, and then coming back to City Council, but that's a bit further down the road. So that is the high-level overview of the climate vulnerability assessment completed to date and the greenhouse gas inventory. If you have specific questions regarding the inventory, how the data was gathered, or if you have any questions on the data within the inventory or the analysis done in the inventory, Ryan can help answer some of those questions.
About the previous tool, simulation tool, on the last slide, I was wondering if is that a publicly available simulation tool, or is that something that is your company?
It's a tool that we built, and it's based off of your data and the forecasts specific to Glendale. So yeah, we'll be building that out. It's a proprietary tool, but it's part of our overall program. So you guys will get access to it and can play around with it and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Ryan. This is the emissions inventory. Is quite a lot to take in. There's a lot of data in there. I spent, some time this week looking through it, and we'll be probably continuing to do so. I guess so. This is something that we didn't go through it all today. I understand there's a lot in here. Are we going to be My question really is what are we going to be doing with this? Is this the data that's going to be baked into this modeling tool that we were just discussing, and then we'll be manipulating, and then that will give us a forecast? Is that kind of the idea?
That is correct, right?
Yeah, and so the inventory you can think of is really the snapshot, right? It's a picture of how things look currently. The next piece that we'll be putting together is the business as usual and adjusted forecasts. And what those will do is take growth projections, job projections, looking at how we expect Glendale to change over time out through 2045. And the business as usual forecast will just assume that everything is as it is today, right? We essentially take the per person emissions and forecast that out into the future. So every new person that moves to Glendale lives like the average person does today. And that kind of gives us a sense of like how emissions would change if we didn't do anything else. And then to that, we'll add in an adjusted forecast, which takes into account emissions that are regional and state level. So renewable portfolio standard, advanced clean fleets, Title 24, a few other things, which will show kind of how emissions will change over time, given those like really important legislation that's out there. And what we'll end up seeing in almost every case is that the business as usual, increases in a linear fashion with population growth, but the adjusted forecast generally decreases a little bit, but there'll be a leftover gap between that adjusted forecast and the target. And that gap is really what the scenario planning tool will start to look at, is like, what do we need to do to fill that gap, to reduce emissions from the adjusted forecast down to the target so that we can hit our goals.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. And I think that actually is, from what it looks like, included already in this inventory or something similar. So I am seeing this gap you're referring to on the third tab. I mean, it's showing something like 800,000 metric tons of CO2, I think is the value of that. So yeah, certainly we'll be interested to know what kind of strategies are in place for us to modify that amount. Okay, any other comments or questions from the commission?
We recognize, as you said, Vice Chairman Bazemore, that there is a lot of data in that inventory. So if you have any questions that you want to propose to the consultants between the next meeting, please funnel those through me. We'll aggregate those, format those, and get those to the consultants so they can answer any specific questions that you may have. As you're reading through it, as stuff pops up, please don't hesitate to connect with us, and we will endeavor to get those answered for you.
Question, David, when does council get this, or have they already gotten it?
Council has not had it yet. If you want to put the, I think we're going to go to the council at the beginning of next year, is when they'll get to see.
So when would we be receiving the packet of that? Would it be like just before the meeting, or will we have more time than that? Or then, like we would for a typical meeting, like when we're going through the whole climate action plan? Like the packet for this we got, but yesterday. So I want to make sure we're being given enough time to digest some of this data and so on, and be prepared to ask questions in advance if necessary and so on. So what's the timing for getting it to us?
I apologize. I mean, this packet was sent out last Thursday, so I'm not, for some reason, I'll have to find out why you did not get it. But we're like 2 weeks prior to the meeting, or we try to get the information to you. Again, the next one is not going to be the cap for you to read. This is going to be looking at these different mitigation measures and be part of that process with the consultants. So there's going to be a long way to go before we present the full cap to you. But yeah, we'll try and get you the information in as timely fashion as possible.
Okay, right, thank
I
you.
apologize if you did not get that last week. So
Well, I
have to
thought
find out
Monday
why.
was a holiday, maybe, something, but.
Yeah, we try not to. I mean, we're supposed to. We have to do it 72 hours prior to the meeting. So that's why it was done last Thursday, because we knew had the holiday. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, what is our next item?
Our next item is sustainability office updates. Item 7A, clothing swap recap. So our office held a clothing swap in collaboration with the Glendale Central Library on August 12th. This was a back-to-school edition clothing swap since schools were starting at that time, all USD schools, including UCC2. So the way the swaps work is that we ask people to bring a maximum of 10 items, and depending on how many items they brought in, they would receive a ticket for those amounts. And then they could use those tickets to just walk around, look, whichever items they wanted, they could just take it using those tickets. So this is a way for us to connect with the community and provide a service where the clothes get circulated instead of ending up in landfills. So we measured all the clothes that we got on scales, and 291 pounds of clothes were collected before the swap. And we kept track of how many people came in with tickets. So 71 people were there swapping clothes. And at the end of the day, we did have 3 bags of clothes left over, but we wanted to make sure that those clothes got a purpose too. So we collaborated with Assistance League Thrift Store. It's a thrift store near the Glendale Central Library. And 2 staff members from that thrift store came to the clothing swap. They helped us. They were there introducing themselves to people. And then at the end of the day, they got those 3 bags of clothes and displayed them at the clothing store. There was one more additional bag of scrap clothing, and that was donated to the Makerspace. Since they have sewing workshops there, they could use those clothes as fabric for people to practice on. And the swap was a success. There were so many people that were asking for when the next one was going to be. So staff is currently in works with the library to try and see when we can provide the next one. That's about it. Is there any questions?
This sounds like it was a great event. I am curious, so of the leftovers, did you happen to weigh those too? I'm wondering, how many were, not even exchanged or taken?
4 bags. It was 4 bags total that were not exchanged. One of them we did not display because they were torn clothes or clothes were damaged. The other 3, it was, say, a large bag.
Okay. Did you get the sense, though, that there were people exchanging and actually using their tickets?
Yes.
Quite a lot? Okay.
Personally, I swapped clothes. I swapped 10 items, and I saw so many people doing this. Some of my items were taken, things like that, yeah.
Okay. Well, great. That sounds good. I think my only comment would be that, if this turns into more of like a donation type thing, that might be kind of a red flag for me. I mean, we certainly have wonderful businesses in the community here that can accept clothing, used clothing. But I think if this sort of event, is attended, like 71, we have 71 people, that's pretty good. And they were using it to exchange clothing. That's certainly a great, a great use of the library and your time. So thank you.
Yeah, I was happy to hear that the rest of them did go to the Assistance League. They have programs for helping underprivileged families to give clothes to school-aged children so that they can attend school, and they call it dressing them. And so they come in and they're given outfits to wear to school, so that they don't necessarily just turn around and sell things. A lot of it's donated back into the community, which I think is great. And it's a great local resource. I've donated, they're my go-to for donating clothes and household items. So I'm glad you guys connected with them.
Same here. They're my go-to too. Yeah.
Question. Is the donation frowned upon? Like if somebody comes in with 10 items, doesn't want anything, and gives that ticket to someone else, is that not acceptable?
On the flyers, we prioritized swapping, and whenever people came in, we asked them, are you going to swap? We had 5 people, I want to say, who donated and did not receive tickets.
Okay.
So when you see the 71 participants swapped, those were people who received tickets,
Okay,
There were 5 more who just wanted to donate.
okay.
Was there an opportunity for people to come and get tickets that didn't even have clothing? Or did you actually had to bring your own clothing to get tickets?
So the first hour, it was people who brought in clothing and got tickets, but afterwards it was free-for-all.
Okay.
And we advertised it as a free-for-all. And staff also walked around the library and went outside and just told people that there's this event and you could just come in and take clothes.
Okay, okay. So it was a 2-hour event, it sounds like? Or, oh, it was a 4-hour, so,
Yeah.
okay. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, well done. Any other comments for?
I just
Sam?
wonder, could people try things on, or are they able to use the restrooms as changing room? I don't know. I mean, I like try something on, even if it's free, before I take it.
I know personally that people did. And we got feedback that it would be best if there was a mirror present, so people can just like wear it, see how it looks. Yeah.
All right, well, with that, what is the next item, please?
Item 8 is adjournment. Do we?
Sorry. So yeah, just one thing, commissioners. We just want to highlight that as part of our community outreach, we're offering actually many grants to community-based organizations in the community, obviously. Each grant is up to $1,000, and the purpose of that grant is for that community-based organization to go out into the community and get feedback on the climate action adaptation plan. So we're not specific how the community needs to use that grant, but they have to meet minimum requirements. Like they have to have 100 attendees come to their event, whatever their event is. They can do workshops on the grants. They can go out and do canvassing. They can develop education materials. They can host an event. So we have this on our website. So if you know of any community-based organizations that may be interested in applying for a grant, we encourage them to send in an application. The application, again, is all on our website, and the application date is, the deadline, is September 26th. So again, we're doing this because those community-based organizations know how to speak to their constituents better than we do. So we want to just give them a little help so they can be part of that process and get that feedback to us and then ultimately back to the consultants regarding the cap. So yes, if you'd like to highlight that amongst your communities and stuff, we'd be very grateful.
Will you be sending us the details on it that we can publicize
We'll send
it
you
as
the
well?
details, absolutely.
Perfect.
Did you say it was required that they talk about or get feedback on the climate action plan?
Yes, it's part of the outreach process for the climate action adaptation plan. So if you have a student group that is interested in doing that, they can apply for the grant too. So we have a total of $4,000, and each grant can apply for $1,000. So.
Okay. Okay. So just to clarify, they could put on any event and use the grant money any way they'd like, with some stipulations, and one of which would be during the event ask for feedback on the climate action plan.
Yeah, so the whole point is to let the community know that we're having this climate action and adaptation plan. Here's a community that we don't usually speak to, so we want to hear your voice. So yes, we're asking them to give specific feedback on the climate action and adaptation plan. How the community-based organizations chooses to get the community to give that feedback is up to them, because they know how to do it better than we do.
And is there a packet of some sort or something like that that you would give to the organization?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, David. Is there, I'm just looking at the information on the website right now, and I see it looks as though this needs to be done and the funds expended by November 30th. Is that correct?
I think we've extended the application date to...
It looks as though the application is, the day you gave was correct.
Right.
Actually, sorry, the day on the website does say September 15th.
Right, so we've extended that out to the 22nd rather. Sorry,
Okay,
not the 26th.
so let's make sure that's updated then.
And the organizations will be chosen by the 27th.
The packet on the website does say that the work can begin as soon as September 25th, but needs to be, the work and mini grant funds must be expended by November 30th. So I think if
Yeah, we'll correct those
If we're
dates. Thank you for
extending
that.
the deadline, let's make sure those are also
Yep.
extended. Okay,
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, thank
So
you.
is it kind of like a reimbursement thing, like the reimbursing the cost of that event, or it's just a grant and like they can spend the grant money however they want, but they need to reach 100 people
Correct.
somehow? Okay.
Just to clarify, so it is a reimbursement model, or is it upfront lump sum?
No, they'll just get the summer money
Okay.
to go ahead and do what we asked
Do
them
what
to
they would like,
Yeah.
or applied for. Great. That's very helpful. Okay. All right.
Is there a reason that there's a deadline on that so soon?
Because we want to try and get as much feedback from the community as soon as possible so we can really begin to work on the adaptation and mitigation measures. If I just keep extending it, it doesn't concentrate the minds of the community. So by saying, give us your feedback by X date, means that the community-based organizations that have the money will work to make sure that they give us that feedback. So,
Right. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, next item.
Item 8, adjournment.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Second?
We are now adjourned at 6:46 p.m.